We are joined by Salim Mansur, Professor Emeritus at Western University, to discuss the momentous historic truckers' rally at Parliament Hill in Ottawa, its ramifications, and the various aspects of how this has been covered in the mainstream media and by the social media, and how it's been looked at from abroad, and what it might portend for Canadians regarding their rights and freedoms in the future. My own personal viewpoint is I've expressed this on actually Just Right, the radio show this week, where I say that in general, protests don't work. They do have some benefits, which I went into the radio program, but they don't affect the change that you might think they do. If a politician is going to reduce the mandates and the draconian measures that they've had in the past 2 years, they'll make it sound as if it's their idea. Much like Scott Moe just came out and said we're going to think about reducing it in the next few days because 90% of the population of Saskatchewan is now vaccinated. Therefore, there is really no need to continue on with the mandates. So he's making it sound as if it's his idea, which is the ploy of a tyrant. He's not apologized for the 2 years of the violation of Saskatchewan's rights. And another ploy of the tyrants, no apologies. And so while this is a great galvanizing event for Canada and an uplifting and spiritually uplifting moment to see all of these Canadians from all walks of life and all ethnicities and cultures across the nation, from Tofino to Bonavista, as Brian Peckford recently said in a speech about it, come together in unity to express the fact that we have rights. They are being violated. We're not going to stand for it. I'd like to find out what your impression of this whole rally has been, Salim, and what it might say about Canada and where we're going. What are your thoughts?
Well, Robert, in your remarks, it seems to me, two issues that you have touched upon. One is that the Trucker Convoy Freedom 2022 that we have been watching over the last week that arrived in Ottawa in numbers and with support of the people from right across the country, a pan-Canadian movement, is an epic event in our history. There is no precedent of this sort. We have never seen, at least in our lifetime, this sort of a gathering of a people expressing their concerns, their demands, and how the government is completely alienated from where the people are. This is in that sense the most amazing demonstration that is still going on. I mean, there is in Alberta-Montana border, there is still the truckers holding their position, on both sides of the border, the truckers from America that are supporting the truckers in Canada, and the truckers are still there with their supporters in Ottawa. So that's one story, and we need to talk about that story. I think that story has put Canada in front of the world. It's a story that is now circulating across the world, from United States to Australia, New Zealand, and everything in between. And there have been reports that I have seen that similar demonstrations have been taking place or being organized in Europe in places like Finland, Belgium, and so on. So that has a remarkable aspect, both in historical terms and in political terms, that we would like to get into. But there's the other side that you're mentioning, that protest movements do not lead to any necessary positive results, and the example that you've made of Scott Moore coming out in the midst of this movement, as the only premier in Canada, the premier of Saskatchewan, telling the people in his province that his government is working to lift all the mandates, but that is going to happen on the basis of his government's um, examination of where the situation is relating to COVID-19, and that he promises that those mandates will come to an end if things are more or less returning to normal, according to, again, the government standard. And so there is no mention here about the truckers movement, the people of Saskatchewan joining the truckers movement, and that this protest is having an effect. But they don't want to make that statement or draw any relationship between this movement and what the government might do. But if that's true, Robert, that the government is oblivious or is insensitive or will not take into any consideration this epic demonstration of Canadians from coast to coast, and they're voicing the view of what they think about their government, then the question that needs to be asked, parallel question is, which you and I both know, is governments of all shade, political parties of all shade, politicians of all shade, have always been in Canada and in democracy like Canada, paying the closest attention to opinion poll and calibrating their performance based upon opinion poll. I mean, it is a common saying that you see a politician putting his finger up in the air, taking a measure of which way the wind is blowing, and then taking a stand accordingly. That means it is not politics of conviction, it's not politics of principle, it is a politics of trying to sell something that is to be bought in some ways by the people. And so I have a sort of a misgiving about your second proposition. They are not going to say that. I mean, Jason Kenney is not going to say that the situation on the border with Montana at Coutts is one that has escalated into demonstrating how authoritarian, if not fascistic, his government is. I mean, the projection that the truckers, as the prime minister said, and as some of the premiers have said, and the opposition leader have said that these are basically a bunch of racists, homophobic, Islamophobic, and so on and so forth, who have come down. They do not represent the Canadian people. Then who represents the Canadian people? This is not some fringe movement. Justin Trudeau tried to describe it right at the outset, that this is a fringe movement and is not representative of the Canadian people. And here, if this is a fringe movement, then it is quite an awesome fringe movement that we are seeing in demonstration. So, yeah, so this is a pan-Canadian movement. This is a movement for the first time in our history that we are seeing that the people have said enough is enough. And in the spontaneous gathering, it began in Western Canada, I believe in Vancouver or in British Columbia, that a few truckers got together and said, let's do this, you know. And a woman went out and got a GoFundMe.
Tamara
going for
Litch.
the
Yes, Tamara Litch.
Correct. So it was individuals, you know, it was spontaneous. There was a spark, so to speak, in the dead of winter. What was supposed to be a 2 weeks lockdown and social distancing and masking to flatten the COVID-19 curve has now gone into over 100 weeks, 2 years. And all of the consequences that we can talk about it. And so here was something that after Christmas and the New Year was talked about by few people, and like a prairie fire, it zoomed across 5 time zones from British Columbia to the Maritimes. and people responded, and people responded almost in unison. And in this deep freeze in our northern latitudes, what we have witnessed has been the most amazing thing that we have witnessed. And what we have witnessed has exposed, I would argue, the cracks and fissures in the Canadian politics and Canadian society that had lain below the radar, that we didn't talk about it. And now we can talk about it. Canada is pretty much a broken country, broken politically, broken economically, broken in terms of moral, spiritual, and there is a complete absence of political leadership in Ottawa or in the provinces to take and pay heed to with the due respect that it demands, especially in a democracy like ours. The reputation of Canada around the world and among us Canadians is that we are a polite, deferential, law-abiding people. We don't get excited over politics too much. The only excitement comes is when our favorite team wins the NHL Stanley Cup. So we are, in that sense, a very docile people. You know, we are not people in that terms of our tradition and our culture and our habits and mores, as is our cousin down south. And yet we have seen now in the past week and more a movement of people from across the country peacefully gathering in Ottawa. And we can compare that gathering in Ottawa with the sort of demonstration we saw in the United States during the summer of 2020. Burning, looting, attacking people, casualties among both the law enforcement agencies and among the citizens. None of that, even though, ironically, it was the Prime Minister and his scabs who tried to promote the image that this is a fringe racist movement waving Confederate flags and swastika. So the cracks that have been exposed, I think, is going to take a long time to heal, if it can be healed, because there is absolutely no leadership in Ottawa, none in the ranks of any of the party that is represented there. What we are seeing them do, in fact, for the last 2 years, the parliament has been empty. We have been having a Zoom parliament, a virtual parliament, it's not been there. And then when the truckers arrived in Ottawa, the Prime Minister basically fled on the excuse that he had been afflicted by COVID-19 and that he has gone into isolation, and he fled. And then from wherever he's hiding, he was tweeting those terrible foul words about our Canadian brothers and sisters. I think a lot of people have seen that tweet. Let me read the tweet over here. This is what he tweeted 2 days ago, Justin Trudeau. Today in the House, members of Parliament unanimously condemn the anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Black racism, homophobia, and transphobia that we have seen on display in Ottawa over the past number of days. Together, let's keep working to make Canada more inclusive. This man is so tone deaf. He's talking about working together to make Canada more inclusive, while Canadians arrive in Ottawa to express their frustration with the government, the parliament, and what they have been enduring for the past 100 weeks and more, just 2 years, and calling them names, and transphobic, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, anti-Black. This was about COVID-19. This was about lockdown. This was about, ending the lockdowns, removing the mandate, and getting back as quickly as we can to being normal once again. And then you have the leader of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh, the party that is basically holding up this minority government, holding the balance of power in the parliament. And what does he say? He says he accuses the Conservative Party MPs and says Conservative Party MPs have endorsed a convoy led by those that claim the superiority of the white bloodline and equate Islam to a disease. Where does he get this from? Canada is 75% or more white Caucasian people. I'm speaking to you, a white Caucasian person, and I am a Canadian, a brown Muslim. And this man, Jagmeet Singh, with a broad brush, is painting the vast majority of Canadian people as people who claim superiority on the basis of white bloodline and are anti-Muslim, Islamophobic. Now, this is the party of the working class, supposedly. This is the party that came into being in the Depression years to demand and support and help the working peoples of Canada. So who are the people who came together to Ottawa, led by truckers, they're the working class people? And this man no longer seems to care about them or represent them or go and stand with them, but engages in vilification. That's what I mean by what our brothers and sisters, the truckers and the convoy have done is really lifted the veil or curtain that hid the fissures and the cracks in the Canadian body politics.
Yeah.
And now it is all open and exposed.
Yeah, as a matter of fact,
I might add here that
no, I was just going to say, Salim, that regarding the exposition of the lies and the cracks and the fissures, I would call it chasms and canyons. Viva Fry, David Freiheit, was in Ottawa streaming live just yesterday. This is Thursday, by the way, to try to get an accurate position on what has happened there, regardless of what the mainstream or mainstream press paid for by the Liberal government have been telling Canadians. So he went, for example, to the War Memorial. It's pristine. There's no graffiti. There was nobody there, even though there were thousands of protesters. He went around the memorial to see the color of the snow, because the mainstream press said that people were urinating on the monument. No, they weren't. No evidence. And it hadn't snowed since that came out, so there's that. He went to see if there was garbage on the street, and what he found were garbage bags put up with garbage in them to collect garbage. He saw people picking up garbage, what little there was. He saw people clearing the snow so that people didn't slip. He saw people, an Aboriginal group, setting up their part of the rally. So far, so there's your racist narrative right there. It doesn't exist. He interviewed black people. He interviewed truckers. He interviewed a doctor who confirmed everything that we've been saying about this whole situation. And there is not just a rift, a small chink in the difference between the mainstream media and government and the people. There is a wide divide, and it's become so blatant that anybody with a camera, anybody with a cell phone can now go out there and just reveal what a bunch of lying, deceitful, far left extremists are the journalists in Canada, at least those part of the mainstream media. And this to me is fantastic. I'm loving it. That when Rosie Barton says one thing, that it's created by Russians, for example, a guest on CBC said that. Russian collusion, here we go again. And you go out there and you see Cian Bexty of the Countersignal, Andrew Lawton of True North, go out to a press conference to which the lying mainstream press were denied access, to meet with the organizers, Benjamin Dichter and Tamara Lich, the original organizers, because this quickly got out of hand, and that was the original convoy, and now you had about 7 other convoys all coming to Ottawa. There's about a 40 to 50 person core group of people trying to organize this rally. But Benjamin Dichter and Tamara Lich gave a press conference where they basically destroyed the mainstream media narrative, destroyed the narrative of Jagmeet Singh and Aaron O'Toole, because he's part of it, or was part of it, he's gone now, and destroyed the narrative of the far left extremist, racist Justin Trudeau. And I have to use these terms, these adjectives to describe these people, because they're using it on us. It's time for turnabout. They are the racists, they're the extremists, they're the Marxists, they're the globalists, they're the destroyers. They hate life, and it's showing. And we're, as citizen reporters, showing it. So this has been a great event. And while Trudeau seems to be doubling down, as a matter of fact, the Minister of Transport has come out in the last couple of days and said, not only are we going to maintain the Vax passport for truckers crossing the border, but we're going to implement it crossing provincial borders as well. We're just now looking into the legality of doing that. So they're doubling down, just like tyrants do. And this is a great momentous event. So what do you think will happen in the next few weeks? We've seen Aaron O'Toole being tossed by the Conservative Party, the far left extreme socialist Conservative Party. What do you think is going to happen next, Celine?
Well, I mean, what has already happened. Let me just mention a couple of things, and then try to see whether these things are, in some sense, an indicator of what we may expect, or how Ottawa and the elite is going to respond in trying to take control of the situation and then spin it to their own advantage. There is a story. We need to give a shout out to our friends in Rebel News, Ezra Levant, for instance. I mean, he has, Rebel News have had reporters embedded in the convoy that headed into Ottawa, and Rebel News have reporters embedded among the truckers in Coutts, Alberta, and in Montana border, from where the reports they have been reporting. And this morning, their reports were picked up in the American media, or the alternate media, where there were words that I read, or reports that I read, that in an internal discussion in Ottawa, the Prime Minister was indicating that he would be willing to send in the military to break down or to remove the truckers from the Alberta-Montana border, but he was, in a sense, voted down, or there was support around the caucus table. However, they were meeting, whether they were meeting in person or whether they were meeting in some sort of a web meeting, that is not clear. But if that report has any credibility, then you can see that both the Prime Minister and the Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney, have been playing the idea of trying to use physical force to push the truckers out and open it up. Or this could also happen in Ottawa. But in the meantime, we can also see that as a result of this past week, media doing its best to denigrate the freedom movement, the convoy, and the people around it, supporting it. The number of things that have happened is, one, in Quebec, the Premier of Quebec, Legault, I believe, has come out and said, or has put the word out, that there will be no vaccine passport being introduced in Quebec, which is what they were going to do. And the tax on the unvaccinated, which was something new we heard about in Canada after Christmas, that Quebec was thinking about taxing the unvaccinated. And of course, they were also moving to stop the unvaccinated people from going out into the public, shopping, grocery, and so on and so forth. So for the moment, the word is that has either been put on the freezer, or that those ideas have been put away and they will not be brought forward or implemented. So that's one news, and one can draw a direct inference that has to do with this movement that is now what we are talking about. Secondly, you mentioned Scott Moe, and so whether he acknowledges the pressures upon his government as a result of this movement. He has gone public in saying that the mandates in Saskatchewan will be withdrawn. And the third thing is how quickly the career of Mr. Erin O'Toole came to an abrupt end, in a manner that he could not have imagined. It was almost a swift assassination, a Brutus moment inside the parliament and in the caucus, where over 50% of the caucus basically said that Erin O'Toole has to go. And then he subsequently resigned yesterday. So one would have to live in another planet to say that none of this thing has any relationship to the truckers' convoy freedom movement of 2022. Obviously, from our perspective, from my perspective, these are closely related issues. So looking forward, it becomes a question whether there will be, once the parliament is fully convened with all the members attending, whether there will be an effort made by the Conservative Party to put a no confidence motion on the floor. Now, that no confidence motion, if it is brought forward, will not get the vote. I don't believe it will get the vote. I mean, the Liberals will be supported by the NDP. The government will not fall, but it will be another chink in the situation that this parliament is basically hanging there by the skin of the teeth. It has lost its legitimacy with the people of Canada, or with the vast majority of the people of Canada, at least in terms of public expression of where the people are, despite whatever the media is reporting.
Yeah.
It also goes to show, I mean, what this has surfaced around the world, that this government and this particular prime minister cannot be taken seriously by anyone. Now, he has failed to show any leadership. This was the moment, if Justin Trudeau, when he got elected in 2015, talked about sunny ways, and that, he will be the people's prime minister, one that is got the sort of what he demonstrated, empathy for everybody, women, minorities, people that he could relate to, and that he will come forward and represent them. This was the moment, this past week, for him, instead of running away, coming out of wherever he has been residing, whether in 24 Sussex or in his cottage, doesn't matter. He is the prime minister of this country. Whatever you and I and others might think about it, he holds the office. This was a moment for him to take a walk, go down Wellington Street, mingle with the crowd at the Centennial Fire, basically listen to what the people have to say, men, women, from across the country, from all the 10 provinces, so to speak, and he didn't have to say too much. He could have said that I've come to listen to you, and I want to understand you and your grievances, and I will try to do my best with my colleague in addressing them. That's all. It would have been a way to diffuse the anger, to change the direction, to show the empathy and respect to the people, and then gone back and tried to deal with this issue in a manner that have won him at least the optics, not only in Canada, but around the world, of a leader who is not afraid in engaging with the people. But he ran. And in doing so,
oh, sorry, continue your thought.
And in doing so, it is not only to the Canadian people he exposed himself. I mean, we are in the midst of a global crisis, so to speak, or at least a European crisis, a NATO crisis in which Canada is a NATO member. On whichever side of the argument one is over Ukraine and Russia, the point of the matter is the world watching a Canadian Prime Minister, a G7 country, and the manner in which leader of this G7 country conducted himself and has behaved has basically taken away any respect. Whatever little there was has taken it away.
Yes.
Canada is totally exposed.
Yeah, and it's not just
in a country that has got no serious leadership, and the people are on their own.
Yeah, as far as the leadership goes, you're absolutely right that, especially with the official opposition, who over the last 2 years has been in lockstep in every degree that matters with the Liberal government and the far left extremist racist Justin Trudeau. So when you support far left extremism, you are a far left extremist. And so this is what we have left in Canada. We have a Liberal Party polling at 31% or 32%, the Conservatives, so-called, polling at 31%, slightly less, and the New Democratic Extreme Marxist Party polling at about 19%. You're left with the impression, and it's a fairly accurate impression, that Canada as a nation is an extreme far left polity. It is an extreme far left culture. It is a socialist nation where the majority of people are socialist. And we are getting the government that the people want, whether it's Conservatives in power or the Liberals or even the NDP, if they ever, God forbid, came to power. We're getting the government we deserved. And why? We're getting it because the school system has been usurped by Marxists. The mainstream media drives the culture, drives the polling. The pollsters themselves are liars. Maybe not all of them. I should be careful about that. But they, in general, fudge the data to make it look like if you want to be on the side of the winning team, then you must hold socialist views and we need socialist government. So the media and the pollsters are what the leaders, so-called, look to see how they should act. Now, in Scott Moe's case in Saskatchewan, that particular province, by the way, has polled that they're more to the right than any other province in Canada. They really are. Because they're really tied to the land. And as we both know, that a society that is tied to the land through like an agrarian society are more closer to being Christian. They're more closer to being religious. They're more closer to being conservative in a small c sense, smaller government. And so Scott Moe has only been following the poll, which only just recently showed that about 52% of the people are asking that mandates be dropped. That's not across the country, that's Saskatchewan, to a lesser degree in Alberta, to no degree in the rest of the country. So I wanted to make sure that that point was driven home. And there's another point as well. Even though Scott Moe and Jason Kenney are planning to talk about reducing mandates, here I'm in New Brunswick, Premier Blaine Higgs on July 31st came out and said, no more restrictions. Take off the masks. We have to live with COVID. What happened 5 weeks later? He got back and implemented some of the most dramatic and draconian and tyrannical impositions onto the people of New Brunswick than any other province except perhaps Quebec. You had to register to get into the province as a Canadian. You had to quarantine for 2 weeks as a Canadian. Everybody's being tested. And everybody still has to wear a mask, even out on the streets. So take with a grain of salt when Scott Moe says we're going to reduce the restrictions. The convoy goes home. The CBC comes out and says Scott Moe is killing people. I'm predicting this, by the way. They're going to come out and say that he's doing the wrong thing, if they haven't already. And so he just might change his tune 4 or 5 weeks from now and get back right on board with everything that the far left extremist racist Justin Trudeau is telling them to do. Am I being a little cynical when I say things like this, Salim? Is the glass more half full than half empty? What do you think?
Well, these are the same cast of character. I mean, we are talking about people, whether Scott Moe, Jason Kenney, the Premier, the Prime Minister, the opposition leaders. It is the same pack, shuffle the deck of cards and expecting a different result. And the people, I would make the argument that 338canada.com, which is what most of us take a look at least once a week to see and gauge where the people are, that basically the numbers have not changed. But on the other hand, I am mentioning my reading of the situation is at a deeper level, Canada is broken. And the question is that broken nature of Canada, and it is severely broken, how and who is going to express it to harness the energy that this freedom convoy movement represents? We cannot. I mean, you have been talking about Scott Moe, or you mentioned anybody, Doug Ford in Ontario, who will be running for, again, the premier, to be re-elected as a premier in the summer of 2022. Election is coming up. And the whole cast of other politicians across Canada in terms of mainstream political party. None of them have demonstrated over this past 2 years any desire or ability or sensitivity to listen to the people. So much has happened. So much has happened in terms of wrecking of the economy. Middle class has been, beaten down in a manner that we have no experience in our history. Families have been broken up. Children have been deprived of their school. We don't know what the effects are going to be in the long term that all of this has brought upon them at such a young age. We know from our own experience watching our children grow up how they have been deprived in terms of not only their education, but in terms of the relationship that is so important in building up the character of a people, the formation of a people, and so on and so forth. And none of them have shown that. I give you a few evidence of that larger picture of brokenness. First, with the political system. Look, we are in the third decade, 2022, of the third millennium. Okay, in this 22 years, third decade, Canada has had 7 federal elections, discounting the 2000 election, which was the election in the year that we turned the millennium. Even if we take that election, 2000 election, we have had 8 elections within 20 years, 22 years. And in those 8 elections, we have had only 3 majority governments. 2000 was a majority government, Jacques Chrétien won, and then stepped down, handed it over to Paul Martin. And Paul Martin couldn't win a majority government when he called the election in 2004. It was a minority government, followed by a minority government of 2006, where Stephen Harper became the minority prime minister, in a minority government prime minister. 2008, again, another minority government. 2011 was a majority government. 2015 was a majority government, with Justin coming back. Then 2019 and 2021, minority government. We've had 5 minority governments in a space of less than 20 years. What does it suggest? It suggests that there is no majority opinion in this country. There is no party, there is no leader that can bring together the people in a manner in which we can have a majority government representing from coast to coast. But when we did have a majority government, take the case of the 2015 majority government that was won by Justin Trudeau. The Liberals were the third party that bounced up from somewhere around under 50 seats in the parliament to winning 184 seats and forming a majority government. But it represented only half the country. West of the Ontario-Manitoba border, the Liberals didn't elect members. It was basically Ontario and Quebec that gave Justin Trudeau the numbers. Similarly, if you go back to the 2011 majority government that Stephen Harper won, the Conservative, it was the same story on the reverse side. Stephen Harper won without winning Quebec and the Maritime. It was in Ontario that he got the numbers, and it was Ontario that again threw him out, So then it became the question by the leader who followed Stephen Harper on the Conservative side, I'm sure, and Erin O'Toole, that we have to discard, that is, the Conservative have to discard just about everything in terms of its relationship with the West. That was the Reform movement, the Canadian Alliance, with which you and I were associated, have to discard most of that to basically take on and becoming a liberal light to win Ontario. And what did the people in Ontario do? They said, if you have a choice between a liberal government and a liberal light, we will go with the Liberals. and that's what happened in 2015 election. And Andrew Scheer, in the 2019 election, and Scheer could not score a goal in an open net, as Peter MacKay said, And the same thing again, Erin O'Toole could not do that, So we are a broken country. And in this broken country, there are other indicators of that. I mean, the economy went from, in 2019, somewhere a little over $30 billion budget deficit to now in a stratosphere. We don't know what the budget deficit is. It is almost $500 billion. and the GDP, the debt now exceed the GDP by almost 2%, twice the GDP, and it is growing. So our economy is broke, we have been implementing in these circumstances a policy of strangulating our resource economy, basically in trying to meet this exaggerated demand that we have put upon ourselves, that is, the liberals have put upon us, along with the support of the conservative, to meet the Paris Accord standards on CO2 emission, and so on. So that is one side of it. Then it is the state of mind of the people. This 2 years have been one in which those people who can work out of their home have been doing okay, relatively speaking. But those who have to go out to work have been devastated in so many different ways. And finally, the straw that broke the camel's back was this vaccine mandate for the truckers that couldn't go across and keep our supply chain going. So given all of these things, as I look at the picture and as I see the information of the convoy and the people who came together and all our support for them, I myself would have gone to Ottawa, but I was not feeling strong enough to go because of my own personal health condition, and I won't get into that. But that was the reason. I've been to Ottawa for all the freedom rallies since 2018. We have been gathering in Ottawa in the summer on the day, and I have attended all of them. But this time I was not feeling strong enough to go. But as I have followed it, the only thing that I could see analogous to the spontaneous coming together of the people across from Canada was from more than 40 years ago, the images of the Solidarity movement. 1979 in Poland, the Polish people, having suffered World War II and then the occupation by the Soviet Union and the deprivation and the humiliation and the persecution, and that and brought about further extenuated by the military government that was imposed by General Jaruzelski. Finally, the workers in the shipyard, I'm forgetting that right now, it'll come to me,
Gdansk.
struck. Pardon me?
I believe the protest was in Gdansk.
Yeah.
Gdansk, they struck. They went on a strike. And you may recall, that strike was a spark plug. We had a strike in a similar sense in 1919 in Winnipeg, but it didn't become a spark plug. What the Gdansk strike became in the case of Poland. In one town, on one port, a spark plug, an ignition that then rallied the people. The people came out, it became a solidarity movement, and a leader appeared from among the workers, not the politician, but from among the workers, Lech Walesa. And the rest is history. It became a movement that was not simply a Polish movement, it became a movement that eventually brought the Soviet Union down. There was, from within Poland, that was the leadership of Walesa and the Solidarity movement, the common people, and then from outside, it was almost providential. The first Polish Pope was elected in the Vatican, John Paul II. There was the British Prime Minister, Maggie Thatcher, and the following year in 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected. And the coming together of this three leaders in support of Lech Walesa and the people of Poland and the Solidarity movement was one that led to ultimately the collapse of Soviet Union, the end of communism. And the other event that comes to mind, again from the same or similar situation, is the movement, the Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia. And then again, from the ranks of the common people emerged Václav Havel, who sees the energy, who gave expression to the concerns and demands of the people in a manner in which ultimately, just as in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, Václav Havel would become the leader and eventually the president of a free Czechoslovakia with the collapse of the Soviet Union. But where is our Lech Walesa? Where is our Václav Havel in Canada? You know, what we have seen is basically petty Mussolini in Jason Kenney, a petty Mussolini in Justin Trudeau, because what they have said in denouncing the common people, Canadians, hardworking people. And by the way, for the first time we have seen in streets of Canada and in our capital, and people who came out here in London, but if you had been here, you would have been with us on the overpass over 401 highways. The crowd of people came out. The people who came out to cheer the convoy were almost half and half women and children. So the women were out. And I believe now that I've been reading the reports, Polish Canadian women from Western Canada have come out and driven all the way to Ottawa to provide support and food and succor to the truckers in Ottawa. Because as they have said, and they are speaking, that as Polish Canadians, they remember solidarity. They remember the March for Freedom. And this is, again, their March for Freedom.
You know, Viva Frei in his live stream
our
yesterday.
elected leaders doing is projecting upon the common people, the mama bears, trying to protect the children from becoming being vaccinated.
You know, Salim, I was watching Viva Frei yesterday in his live stream in Ottawa. He interviewed a Romanian elderly man who was there, who actually fled. He grew up in communist Romania. He fled. Viva Frei asked him, David Freiheit asked him, what are the similarities? Do you see any similarities with Canada today and communist Romania before the breakup of the Soviet Union? And he said, this is the same. He says, this is communism. We are living in communism. So these people from Eastern Europe have especially the elderly, have a first-hand knowledge. And they are telling us, this is the wrong road to go down. This is communism. Stop. Get off of this track, because we all know where it leads. It leads to genocide, right? And that is what we're witnessing. So, yes, these Polish people coming and giving succor to the truckers is very poetic, very apt.
Exactly. And so what, and that's the broken nature that our political leader, that is our political party, and they keep shuffling the deck to get these political leaders, you know. So they will shuffle, the conservatives will shuffle the deck. They shuffled the deck out Andrew Scheer. They drove out Maxime Bernier, who was demonstrating his own mind, his own thinking, and standing with the people on the fundamental question of our freedom. They will shuffle the deck. As they did then, they got Andrew Scheer, then they shuffled the deck and they got Erin O'Toole, and they will shuffle the deck and get somebody similar. There's not going to be any fundamental difference. And one can say the same thing is going to happen with the Liberals, the same thing with the NDP. By the way, all of these leaders in Canada at this present moment of time that we are speaking about are in so many ways basically what I might call the Soros, Klaus Schwab babies, taught, mentored, tutored, and then put in positions where they then emerge as leaders. There it is, Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister, Jagmeet Singh, Jason Kenney, Muriel Rempel, and a whole lot of others who are part of that crowd of Klaus Schwab, George Soros, World Economic Forum, Davis gathering, who are running our country, not for the benefit, prosperity, and concerns of the Canadian people, but for the oligarchs who are pushing the globalist agenda. Where is our Lech Walesa? Where is our Václav Havel?
Well, I'll tell you where he is.
About these things.
I'll tell you where our
talks
Václav
about
Havel
these
is.
I'll tell you where our Lech Walesa and our Václav Havel is. Maxime Bernier. He was on Parliament Hill during this convoy, and I swear to God, all that was missing was the anointing of oil and the palm leaves over his head, as people loved him. They surrounded him, they hugged him, they had all the selfies with him, because he represents more so the ideals of this freedom rally than any of those other leaders put together. He's the leader that we're looking for. Unfortunately, as I reiterate, this is a far-left socialist country who has yet, because of the media, because of the schools, because of the universities, and of the hatred that they imbue and spread, he has been vilified by the powers that be, and people have a wrong impression of him. He is our Lech Walesa. He is our Reagan. He is our Margaret Thatcher. He is our Nigel Farage. He is our Donald Trump. He is our Ron DeSantis. And if people only realize that, can get past the CBC, CTV, globalist, far-left, extreme racist news, they will come to, I hope, embrace that, because the alternative is frightening.
Right. So I agree with you. I mean, you and I both Maxime, and we have been Maxime, and we have worked with Maxime, so we know. But Maxime is about the people. I'm saying, where are the leaders, those sitting in Ottawa,
Yes.
and who are sitting in the various assemblies across the country, in the provincial capitals? There's not one among them, nor one among the elected members or representatives, however you want to designate them, the 338 in Ottawa and across the country, who has stood up and from the assembly spoken out of what we are saying. I mean, in the case of Václav Havel or Lech Walesa, the people in communist Poland and in communist Czechoslovakia at that time, we're going back to, in the case of Solidarity Movement, 1979. In the case of Václav Havel, the Prague Spring was 1969. So for a lot of people in Canada, especially people under the age of 50, all of this is ancient history, and they will not know about it. I'm talking in a general term now, but that's what my thoughts went to. But for them at that moment in their history, nobody, no rational person and knowledgeable person and person watching what is happening to their country gave any credence, any respect to their national assemblies at that time. These were all communist controlled. They were appointed people, so the voice of the people was in the street. Yes, the voice of the people is in the street. I mean, Maxime Bernier is out there and he's alone. Those pastors who've been abused, insulted, handcuffed and taken to prison are the voice of the people. There are too few of them. There should be a whole lot of them. But that is another stain upon the broken nature of our country, that the churches have basically gone along with this authoritarian mandates pushed by the government. So apart from Maxime Bernier, we have no leaders talking about it. What we have, leaders projecting their own inclinations and their own attitudes upon the people. And all that the people are wanting is that somebody should pay attention to them and address their questions and address their concerns. This is not asking too much in what was and is supposed to be a democracy. But that's the other thing. I don't know whether we have the time here to get into it or not, but I'll just put it on the table. What has happened over this last 2 years, and this convoy movement has brought it to the surface in a manner that is now undeniable, that the ideas that we have held for so long with such conviction, that Canada is a free country, that a constitution provides for the defense and protection of the Charter of Right and Freedom of Canadians, is basically, a hoax. There is no freedom in Canada. What we have in Canada is a rule by an elite that imposes upon Canada their whims, their caprice, and their direction. We have gone along with that because we have been such a peaceful country. We have not suffered like the people in Poland, the people in Czechoslovakia, people in Hungary. Thank God, we have had a very peaceful existence. We are also a country that has been blessed with immense amount of natural resources and natural richness. And so we have been a very peaceful country where the citizens have been law-abiding. But when the time came, when the people rose up and said, what about our rights and freedom that we have taken, or we were told to take as granted? This is the 40th anniversary, the Charter of Rights and Freedom. We find that it is non-existent. And then when we read the documents, and the people need to be educated upon this, you find that these are all conditional based upon whatever the political leaders want, whether it is Section 33, whether it is the very opening Section 1 of the Charter, the limitation clause, that,
Section
these are
33
on the book, they're all
let,
limited
just to let people,
decision of the leaders.
Yeah, just to let people know, Section 33 is the notwithstanding clause.
Yes, that's right. But Section 1 is the opening clause.
Yes.
That is the thing, that you have these rights until we tell you you do not. Mind you, that there is a test that the courts do apply to make sure that that's not abused by politicians. But I tell you the truth, Salim, if it takes 10 years to go through the courts, as it has, for example, Caledonia took 13 years to be proven right, the protesters there. If it takes that long for our wheels of justice to defend our rights according to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, what good is it? That's 10 years is for a lot of people a lifetime. If you go from the age of 40 to 50 living under a draconian tyrannical rule just because the wheels of justice are so darn slow, what point is it?
Well, absolutely, you're right. But take the case, that we have only living participant premier from the 1980 discussion of the Charter of Rights and Freedom that took place then following the election of Prime Minister Trudeau in 1980, and then referendum debate in Quebec that was defeated. And that became the occasion of patriating the BNA Act. And with the BNA Act, what added on to it was the Charter of Rights and Freedom. So the only person around from that time who was sitting on the table is the former Premier of Newfoundland, Brian Peckford. And he has now launched a case on the question of mobility rights that has been violated in the charter. Well, good for him. But where were the politicians, sitting members, current politicians, current crop of politicians, both in Ottawa, in the parliament, and right across the country in the provincial legislatures, who would have stood up and said, all of this thing that is being pushed through by the governments, provincial governments and the federal government, is in violation of the fundamental rights of freedom of the people of Canada. So let's take a pause and let's take that into consideration of how we balance what is our security and our safety alongside our freedoms. Nobody stood up.
Yeah.
Nobody talked about it. Nobody questioned it, you know? So we now confront the issue that what is it that we have been living with for all these many years? It is only in a crisis that these issues come forth, you know? In good time, nobody asks these questions. Like in good time, nobody asks how much calorie you're injecting into your body till you get struck with a heart attack, you know? And then all of these questions emerges. So what we have been living through is the formula of peace, order, and good government of the, you know, that is embedded in our BNA Act 1967. Well, peace, order, and good government, which is what Justin Trudeau will say, and which is what Doug Ford will say, and Jason Kenney will say, that is what they are doing, you know, in confronting this COVID pandemic, and so suspending just about everything that we basically have taken for granted because nobody questioned it. And, you know, we understood that we are a free people. But they come along and they said, no, you cannot go out front, you cannot gather for Christmas, you cannot go to school, you cannot go to libraries, you know, and so on and so forth. And they pushed mandates through, all under that rubric of peace, order, and good government. But peace, order, and good government is a formula that can very well be practiced and in practice in Fidel Castro's Cuba, in Maduro's Venezuela, in Kim Jong-un's North Korea, and so on and so forth. Any one of these petty dictators or totalitarian leaders, all the way up to, you know, Stalin and Mao and others, say, you know, what we are doing for the people in terms of peace, order, and good government. That's an authoritarian formula. It is not about, as in the American Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and therefore the Bill of Rights that cannot be touched by anybody, that those are something inherent in the people, endowed by the Creator, and cannot be touched by anyone unless there is a whole set of requirements that they go through the hoops, you know, and the amending formula and so on and so forth before you touch it. It is the First Amendment right, the Second Amendment right, the mobility rights, and so the property rights, and so on and so forth. But in Canada, now we are exposed. The question is, where is the leader apart from Maxime Bernier? And Maxime Bernier's voice is basically censored by the mainstream media. It is only through our social media that we get to talk about him, or to talk about not only Maxime Bernier, but what we're talking about, the fundamental issue where the rubber hits the road, which is what our brothers and sisters, the mama bears who came out in trying to protect the children. By the way, the mama bears made the difference very recently in the American election in Virginia. You know, when they came out in numbers against the Democratic Party in the election in Virginia state, and elected a Republican governor throughout the Democratic governor on the issue of the critical race theory and what was being taught to their children in schools, colleges, and universities. It was the mama bears that made the difference. And I think this is what is remarkable that we have witnessed. We are not alone. The men are not alone. They're not coming home alone to their mothers, their wives, their sisters, their, you know, the the women half of the family, they are coming home where the women are as enraged, if not more enraged than the men. This is for the first time, there is no difference between the two. There was a letter by the RCMP officer earlier in January that went public in which he was put on absence, yes, a leave because he refused to go with the vaccine mandate. And in that letter, he talked about number of things, but one of the things that he pointed out was that in the last census in Canada that the federal government did and the forms that they printed, he brought this out, we all saw it, but in his letter to the Canadian people, he pointed out that when he was filling out the form, in terms of the person's sex, male, female, there was another box that there is supposed to be a third gender, a fourth gender. It defies anything in terms of biological science. And this is what the federal government is pushing. This is the progressivist push in terms of a progressive revolution to change the very fundamental reality of who we are, not only as a people, but what we believe in, how we have lived our lives, and so on and so forth. Right from, the question of our biology, that we are not simply male and female, but we may be many other genders that has been cooked up, to the whole agenda, the globalist agenda of World Economic Forum, that this COVID-19 mandate that was imposed and an economy and a country shut down was to turn the country into compliance with that globalist agenda. And again, apart from the PPC, no other political party and political leader was speaking about it.
We are living in interesting times. I believe that's a Chinese curse, isn't it? So we're living a Chinese curse for real. Thank you, Salim. Great discussion. Appreciate it.
Thank you.